All right, everyone ready? All right, I'm going to call the Thursday, April 6th work session of Narberth Borough Council to order. Ms. Bryant, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Council President Fred Bush.
Here.
Council Vice President Michelle Cananopoulos. Here. Council Member Jean Bura. Here. Council Member Barbara Fortner.
Here.
Council Member Rob McGrady.
Here.
Council Member Cindy Rickards. Here. Council Member Ira Winston. Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
All right. Does anyone have any changes or additions to propose to the agenda? All right. So I do have some comments about the EV chargers. I do have to say that, you know, considering the items that are on today's agenda, which includes, 201 Sabine and parking changes for the borough, I would not have expected the EV chargers to be the most significant item facing the community right now. But I do want to explain some more about why council views this as an important project and why we're acting as we are. So the quick summary is that with the support of grant funding, we are installing chargers in residential areas to fulfill the needs of Narberth residents who are unable currently to purchase an electric vehicle because they can't install a charger. So the chargers are owned by the borough, and the electricity is sold to the users basically at cost to recoup the borough's costs for the electricity. These chargers support our pledge to transition the borough to clean energy and our comprehensive plan and climate plan goals. The sites were selected on streets that had a number of residents who don't live in single-family houses with a driveway, and where our parking study had indicated that there was not a significant parking issue. So why do we need more electric chargers? So if you haven't been sort of following the news, a lot of car manufacturers have announced that they're going to be transitioning to only electric cars from now on. So Honda right now is only selling electric vehicles in Europe. They're not selling any gasoline vehicles. On the high end, like Mercedes has said they're going to go all EV by 2025, Bentley by 2026, Cadillac by 2030, Jaguar and Land Rover by 2030. Mazda is going to transition all of theirs to electric by 2030, as well as Volvo, GM 2035. And in addition, just locally, Maryland and New Jersey have said that they are only going to be allowing sale of electric vehicles in their state by 2035. Delaware is considering a bill right now that would do the same thing. This would phase in over time. So in a couple of years, half of all vehicles sold in these states are going to be electric. So there's going to be a lot of, it's going to be hard to buy a new gasoline vehicle, and there's going to be a need for infrastructure to support them. So why is anybody doing this? I mean, the big issue is climate change. So when all of this was, hitting the news, the latest report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, was released. This is the 6th progress report. It's a collaboration between a huge number of scientists taking all of the, looking at various aspects of the science and the current studies and trying to amalgamate them into something that policymakers can look at, like us. I mean, we are policymakers on a small scale, but nonetheless, it's intended for people like the borough to look at and use to make their decisions. And their conclusion is that current plans to deal with climate change are likely to lead to about 2.8 degrees Celsius, which is 5 degrees Fahrenheit, of climate change by 2100. And this is a very significant amount that's going to put huge stresses on populations throughout the world. And it's going to make it very difficult to, for a lot of people to live. And one of the reasons that we are on this path toward a very high degree of climate change is that governments have not been carrying out their pledges. That carbon emissions are about 15% higher than they would be if governments throughout the world had fulfilled their pledges, had gone ahead and done what they said we were going to do. And as a result, we are on a path to extreme global warming. So, Narberth has also made these pledges, and we do not want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. And we want to make sure that our pledges that we carry out. And transitioning to electric vehicles is a very important step to reducing carbon emissions throughout the borough. So it was identified in our comprehensive plan as an important target for us. The comprehensive plan, the picture of an electric charger in there and identifies that we should be providing incentives for residents and visitors to switch from petroleum-based vehicles to alternative fuel vehicles through chargers. It also specifically talks about our streetscape design, the comp plan, and says we should be giving consideration to how accommodations may be built into our streetscape to facilitate these changing needs. So our climate action plan came after the comp plan, and electric vehicles have become more of a factor at that point, and it specifically calls upon us to pursue additional opportunities to install charging stations, support businesses who would like to install their own charging stations, and provide support for residents at homes that lack off-street parking. And in fact, the climate action plan identifies electric vehicles as the single most effective thing we can do to reduce carbon emissions in the borough. So it kind of looks at how much carbon would be removed, would not be emitted in the air if we took various steps. And supporting electric cars was the one that had the biggest impact. So this is why we're doing this. The chargers are being purchased by the borough, they are owned by the borough, and they are being provided as a public service. And we are charging people who use them to cover the costs of the electricity itself. We've had significant assistance from various grants in doing this, although the borough has spent money of its own. So we have had some issues. So obviously this is something new for the borough, and this is relatively new for Pennsylvania. There are not really other communities that have been looking at this here in Pennsylvania. And again, this is a problem. This is a government not fulfilling its pledges. So I think in a better world, we would be, going, the state of Pennsylvania would be rolling this out on a wide scale. But in the absence of the state sort of fulfilling what it needs to do for its citizens, we're stepping forward. And as a result, sometimes when we try something new, it takes a while to work out all the details. Mm-hmm. So we'll be discussing, obviously, I think the communications needed to be much improved. The project was not really communicated to the folks who would be seeing the charging stations, and we will be doing a better job of that in the future. We'll be discussing later on tonight steps we're going to take to make sure that future projects, we're also going to be doing a bunch of stormwater bump outs, similar to the ones we've got here. The communications issues are very similar. We want to make sure that everybody is informed about what's going to happen. We want to make sure that everybody knows why this is happening and why it's important. And we're going to be talking about the flow signs, about whether we can make changes to make it a little less intrusive in the community. I do want to say that I've also heard safety concerns about these chargers. They've been installed by a licensed electrician. The installations were monitored by PICO. There are over 100,000 of these level 2 chargers installed throughout the US right now. This is a established and safe technology. So just wanted to share those details. And reiterate again that this is coming from sort of a long-standing pledge from the borough government to support electric vehicles and support our transition to a clean energy future. We've had a lot of meetings internally discussing these topics, public meetings, and I regret that, you know, the message has not reached the community as well as we would hope it will. And again, we're going to be discussing how we'll improve that going forward. All right. So all that being said, our mayor is not here tonight, so we'll be moving on to public comment. So public comment will be limited to, as it always is, to 3 minutes per person. I'll just move around the room here and then we'll go online. If you can state your name and your address, then we will start timing. And we will also now respond directly to public comment. But when we get to the agenda item, we will take it into account at that point. All right. So let's begin public comment. I'll start in the front row. Serge, do you have public comment? No. Okay. Move on to the second round.
Yeah, please. Where do you want me to go?
I think if you just stand up,
You just
you'll be able to hear
project towards the
Oh,
owl.
I can project. Don't worry. Thank you. Can I go to one of the corners? Is that okay?
Sure.
I'm just gonna put something down. I'm gonna try my best to keep the 3 minutes, but I might go over by a minute, but I'm very aware.
Well, the limit's 3 minutes.
Okay, well, since we didn't get any notice, I'm asking for maybe 3.5 to 4, but I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna get my points out and speak as quickly as I can. I'm gonna hand exhibits up at the end, okay? So I don't take time, so you don't look at them. My name's Julian Dangelio. I am a resident at 226 North Essex Avenue, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening. I am one of the property owners at 226 North Essex. I live in Unit 303. I've lived there about 6 years. Received no notice of the charge of the EV charge that went out in front of my building. I have posted on Facebook. I wanted to let you know that I have reached out to several different media outlets, news stations, and I'm continuing to reach out to media outlets. I've also placed a call to the general counsel at Flow today to talk to him to see what he has to say about this. Again, if there had been notice and communication early in this whole process, we wouldn't be here. So, and I have a bunch of questions, but one is, did you guys ever consider maybe like looking at for voluntarily who might want these on their properties? Because if the people really wanted electric vehicles, maybe people would have accepted them voluntarily on the properties. I don't know if that was ever considered, but it might have gone over better than just sticking them on somebody's property without giving any notice, any consent, any communication. So when the EV charger went up, it started to go up on our property a few weeks ago. I honestly thought at first it was a shade commission tree. That's what I thought. I park out on the street a lot of nights. I do have a parking spot in the back. I've had 2 Achilles surgeries within a year, and it's easier for me to bring groceries in, bags in, things like that. Easier to get in other than steps. I go in, I try to park out in front. Parts of nights, some nights I can't. I saw the concrete going in. I knew there was a news story. I saw the news story. Mr. Bush, I thank you for apologizing. I realized you said there was a mistake. You took ownership. I appreciate it. That single family resident asked to have the EV charger moved. And that person stated that she did not want a, quote, gas station type thing on her lawn. Well, this is what we didn't want on our property either. That cement was there. The whole project was halted. We thought maybe it was going to go away, or maybe somebody was going to talk to us. It didn't happen. The project was completed. I believe maybe last week the charges went in, and then Tuesday morning it came out, and there was the big flow sign that's 15 feet above in the air. It literally looks like a gas station pump. It's devaluing my property that I'm proud of and that I'm proud of living in. And I've lived in for 6 years and not coming to comment on anything. There are 21 units in my condos, 18 owners. None of the owners were consulted. None of them were apprised of any of this. We own the sidewalks when you want us to shovel snow, but you guys put the sidewalks when you want to put in EV chargers. The streets are public property when anybody can park, but they're not when the EV charger's there. There's 2 final comments I just want to make. One is, again, I feel like we are being discriminated against because we are not single-family homeowners. You made an exception for the other homeowner. She asked for it to be moved. You said you had communicated. You still didn't communicate with us. We asked for it to be removed. If not, you're discriminating against not only people that don't have EV or electric cars, but you're discriminating against people that aren't single-family homeowners. And I don't think that's really fair to be discriminatory, and you are. And it's called precedent. If you don't do what you did for her, then you're not keeping in line with what you already did. And that's wrong. And that's precedent. Renewable law, that's precedent.
Right.
So I'm asking you to do that. Handing up photos of the pictures in front of our building, what went up this week. And please compare it to the one that's in the 100 block. It looks very different, very different. And
Man, your time is up.
Yeah.
Just
I know, but I didn't get any opportunity
Ma'am, your
before I went
time is
in.
up. Please give me the handouts and I'll distribute them.
I really,
Your time is up, ma'am. Give me the handouts, I'll distribute them. Do you want me?
yeah, no, that's fine, but I'm just telling you that that's very disrespectful to somebody that is a
It's
homeowner.
disrespectful to our time and everyone else's time here.
Yeah, it's very disrespectful to a resident. It's just disrespectful. That's kind of rude. It's just rude.
the limits apply to everyone.
I get it, but I didn't get an opportunity before. So I'll hold it up and I'll defer the others. Thank you.
Well, I think I'll wait for this.
There you go. You have passed on. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Ma'am?
Hello, good evening. My name is Mary McCall. I live at 226 North Essex, 304. I've lived there for 13 years. The safety issues are horrendous and scare me to death. But the first thing is, we were not notified. Nobody in our building, myself and a few other people here are on the board, we were not notified of what was going to happen. I came out one day and saw the building sidewalk and did not know what was going on until someone texted me a little bit later. There are charging stations down the block. There is what I tell me is called a rain garden. That's taken up 4 or 5 parking spaces on Essex Avenue. Essex Avenue has a bus stop. There's a lot of children who get in and out right where the EV park is. The bus stop's there. Whether or not they're going to change, I don't know. But right now, that's what it does. And that's not real safe as far as I'm concerned. It's not real safe for any of us. It's also the parking spot that a lot of our owners have to use to unload, and it's gone now. They can't, if a person is disabled and more older and needs a little more support, that's where they usually park and unload their car. That's no longer possible. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Frances Jackson. I'm an owner at 226 North Essex Avenue. I've been there 19 years almost. This was very disconcerting to me that suddenly disappeared out of nowhere, no notice, no anything. I find it disrespectful. It would have been nice at least to have some contact with you folks that this is happening. And I just want to know if all of you live here in Arbor, is there a charging station in front of your house? I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Karen? No. Sir?
Hello, my name is James Brophy. I'm a resident of 226 North Essex. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of my father, Thomas Brophy, who could not come here due to him being physically challenged and thus unable to attend the meeting. These words are his. I want to thank the Borough for the opportunity to state my opinion on the issue of an EV charging station being installed in front of 226 North Essex Avenue. The likelihood of disturbances to the peace of our home, which counts 10 Essex Avenue facing units, is not theoretical, it is guaranteed. Inexplicably, the borough wants to install a 24-hour filling station smack dab in front of a building that contains 21 units and houses almost 40 people. This mixed dwelling stretch of North Essex Avenue is perhaps the most densely populated area in our borough. To make the EV charging station accessible, it will necessitate the creation of a dedicated parking spot, which will diminish the already tight amount of parking in this area. Parking on North Essex Avenue is already reduced to accommodate staff from number 44 bus. It's unfair to further curtail access to parking for these Northbridge residents. Fire engines and ambulances, as well as the 44 bus, use North Essex Avenue as a key connector. The likelihood of cars queuing up to refuel is not far-fetched. At best, it presents an inconvenience, and at worst, could interfere with emergency operations. Rapid EV chargers provide between 60 to 200 miles of range in 20 to 30 minutes of charging time. What do you think people who have no vested interest in this area will do while they wait for their car to charge? Many will do what people have done at gas stations for generations. That is, empty their ashtrays and dump their trash. Littering is more benign than the more foreboding possibilities that a dedicated open parking space provides. It takes 30 steps to walk from the proposed EV charging station to our front door. I think that people intent on criminal activities will not take advantage of this open space is to purposely put on blinders and ignore the realities of our time. To place this commercial operation in the middle of a residential space was a terrible idea in the first place. Making that decision without any consultation with residents and taxpayers compounded that error. Tonight's meeting provides the opportunity to correct these mistakes. Please do a right thing and remove the EV charging station from in front of 226 North Essex Avenue. Thank you.
Well done, Jake.
Sir?
Nothing more to add.
All right.
All right, so, for folks on Zoom, I think most of you have done this before, but for those of you who have not, you either need to, literally raise your hand on video or use the raise hand function on Zoom. I will, call on you. You'll get an opportunity to unmute yourself, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of your 3 minutes, you'll be muted again. All right, so any, public comment on Zoom? All right, first up, I see Carol Marie Scanlon.
Hello, I would like to just make a note that the night of this meeting is on the second night of Passover, Holy Thursday, and during spring break. So I would like to have council table 201 Sabine's conversation, since that is such an important issue. Not that the EV stations are not, but 201 is an important issue because many people cannot come to this meeting based on their faith and prior plans. It's just doesn't seem to be in good transparency for the borough.
I hope I like this one.
You did very well.
Sir, is it good?
Have a good rest of the night. I paused the timer, Carolyn.
Thanks. Sorry, we had a little disruption here. Go ahead, Carolyn.
All right, I'd like to also, with the EV stations, they should be not in the neighborhoods. People who are going to be coming and going, they should be down by the park, even in the Sabine parking lot, but not right dead smack in front of someone's house. I think that's a poor planning and not safe for residents. If someone wants to have an EV station in front of their house, they should put one in and not expect the borough taxpayers to be paying for it. Even though there's grants, there's still costs for the borough to maintain those. And I also would like to ask the borough if you have thought about having AED or AED stations put in. I think that would be a very good addition to the borough, perhaps one at the train station, one at each of the parks. Our parks are so used. Our downtown area is used, that there are grants that are available for them. They're easy to use. So I think that would be a really important addition to our town and our walkability and the safety of our town.
Thank you for the suggestion.
All right, here. All right, let's move on. As of this moment, I do not see anyone else's hand raised on,
Alright.
on Zoom.
If anyone else on Zoom would like to make public comment, please raise your hand or make yourself aware, or make Samantha aware of it. All right, thank you. Public comment is now closed. Let's move on to our first discussion item, which is the draft RFP for 201 Scanlon. So first of all, I do want to make it clear that we did receive, since the issue was brought up, we did receive a communication from our lawyer, from our borough solicitor, assuring us that this being a duly announced and scheduled meeting, that it was perfectly appropriate to move on with borough business, including 201 Save Line. And I also want to make it clear that we will continue to be discussing this topic of the 201 Save Line RFP through next month. So we will not be making a decision this month. We will be voting on this next month, which will allow the public more opportunities to express their concerns. All right. So moving on to the RFP. I just got a message here. I want to make sure I see. All right. Who's leading us off here?
I'll start.
Okay.
So as discussed at Borough Council at a prior public meeting, myself, Vice President Panopoulos, and Councilmember Shortner met with the Director of the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority to talk about drafting a RFP as we figure out what option 4 actually means for the property. As we talked about before, again, this doesn't mean we're committing to option 4, and you'll see there's language in the RFP that explicitly notes that Borough Council could reject all of the bids received if we do move forward with advertising this RFP. I drive a few minutes here. I'll be happy for any of the other members involved to provide some comments. What we attempted to do with the RFP was reflect the public discussion we've heard to date about what option 4 might entail from members of the public as well as members of Borough Council. I think some of the things that I want to highlight about it, as we emphasized before, this RFP does not call for the development of the entire 201 Save Line property. In fact, it calls explicitly for development of a very limited portion of the property, that being a portion along Montgomery Avenue. The RFP also explicitly speaks to the need to provide a buffer zone on Save Line Avenue between any potential development, as well as from the property owners there. If council were to move forward, if let's say we get through this process and we move forward with it, and council ended up having a proposal that made sense, which we'll talk about the further process in a minute, the open and recreational space that's currently at Save Line Park will be tremendously expanded from what's currently there. So I just want to make sure everyone has an accurate idea of what exactly we're talking about when we talk about this RFP and option 4. This RFP lays some what I would call ground rules for what we're looking for in a development proposal. It doesn't say you have to specifically do X, Y, and Z, but it does say proposals that meet what Borough Council and the public have told us they're looking for will be more favorably viewed by Borough Council. I think that's some of the highlights I have for this second about the RFP itself, and I don't want to talk about what the process going forward would be until we have a chance to kind of talk that through more first. So I certainly welcome any additional comments from our council vice president or councilman Thornton on it.
I don't actually have anything that I can add to what you have very thorough background. I mean, I think that the document kind of speaks for itself, and the best way to sort of get a sense of what we're considering is to just read it. Mm-hmm. And I want to save the time and hear from other council members, because I feel like I've heard myself talk about this and think about this entirely too much.
Mm-hmm. Right. Ms. Fortner, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add is I would just encourage anyone who is concerned about this to look at the RFP and look at the map in there and see how much more open space the option 4 would bring to the borough. This is not what some people like to characterize as full development at all by any stretch of the means. And so I really encourage people to look at the actual map and read what's in here. I think you'll be reassured about what this is about.
The other part I'd like to remind council and for the future public review about this is, unlike a usual RDA project, the borough is not selling any portion of the property. This RFP calls for any proposal to lease any of the development portion of the property. So the borough will continue to maintain control and ownership over the entire property. So to talk about where we're at right now and what we need to accomplish in this step of the process is now we have this draft RFP. As council president mentioned, there's an opportunity now for council and the public to provide feedback to borough council as we work our way through what we want to do going forward. And at some point, what will happen is borough council will need to vote to advertise this RFP once we've had, an opportunity for council president's direction in regards to it. Again, I want to emphasize that the future steps beyond this, again, council voting to advertise this RFP does not mean we're going to accept the development proposal. It could be that all the proposals we get back could be completely out of line with what the RFP said. We were, our small group was warned by the executive director of the RDA that despite what we put in this, some developers might try to put in, something that doesn't follow those guidelines, and those sort of proposals would, of course, not fare well and would not be seriously considered. So that's one possibility. We don't get any proposals that make any sense. Another possibility, which I've spoke to before in prior meetings, is that, if we do get some proposals that make sense, what's going to happen then is we're going to have a public presentation with that developer to get a better sense of what their proposal is, for the public to have an opportunity to ask questions of that developer, for council to have an opportunity to ask questions. And then hopefully, we'll see what we have at the end of it. Hopefully council can have a bevy of options, including option one for the property, which is, again, for it to remain a park, or there'll be some sort of development option that fits within this RFP and within the parameters of option 4 that we previously talked about.
One comment for the public, and obviously we can talk about this later, but I want to say it really clearly because Barbara just called the public's attention to the map. This is the first time I am seeing the map that we enclosed in here. I don't know why County drew the development at all, the acre that way, but that is absolutely not the portion of the site that we have ever discussed would be open to development. We talked about the back corner, not the entire frontage. So we will have to, members of the public, do not rely on that map. We will reissue one that is accurate. It should be better.
Yes.
Yeah, what's on the website is the correct.
I apologize for that.
So again, this is why we're vetting it now. This is why we're not voting on anything tonight. Before this comes to a council vote, we'll have the updated correct map. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'm making a note about that right now.
Does any other council members have comments on the text of what's in there, the questions about process?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You so clearly articulated this. I think when we made the resolution, was it 2017? To maintain about
2020.
Was it 2020?
Time that's not.
No, anyway, whenever, it was at the beginning of our term. I don't think I ever imagined that we would envision this significant amount of open green space.
Oh, yeah, I was very pleased with it. Thank you for putting it together. So hopefully we'll have an option. If not, we have no option.
Yeah, I think it did a good job of addressing a lot of the community needs that have come up in the public meetings, like keeping the daycare and the option for different kinds of housing there. So I think, I think everyone should take a look at it and to get their information.
So I think that I could use a little more description of kind of the composition of the Narber business district and sort of what the surrounding buildings are like, just so it fits in character with the rest of the area and the rest of Narber. So nobody submits something that is just not in keeping with that we're just going to reject out of hand. It's not being in keeping with Narber. So a little better description of what our built environment is like here now would be helpful.
If it has to.
You'd think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable. I don't know that it says anywhere that, you know, projects will be evaluated in part the extent to which that they are in keeping with the, you know, local environment department, but in the state that make that be something that we use as a evaluating criteria. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I mean, because we're going to be using that as a criteria. Whether or not we announce it may as well be made explicit.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing I did think of is, have we given any thought to, like incorporating any kind of walking trail around that property? Just to, maybe that can like be put forward as an option as well.
I think, so that's actually a good point. I think, I was trying to think what the best way to address that is maybe through the master park plan or through this RFP. That's a good question, because in a certain sense, there has to be, you know, obviously harmony between those two components. And, you know, if this is an opportunity, if it's something we know we want to do and we have an opportunity for someone other than the borough to have to pay for doing it, that's certainly a benefit to the public.
I mean, especially because we know there's going to be an enhanced park around. I mean, it ought to interface with the park in some way, to at least acknowledge the park.
I think pedestrian access will be important. And I know there's a little language in there about equal access to pedestrian.
Could we put something in there where
to the development?
What, I mean, like going through the development, you have this big drop off down the there's not like a compelling need to get pedestrian access through it to something that's walkable, because it's not going to happen. So pedestrian access to the,
There's the daycare, with the pedestrian access, there's a line, so that people could walk to the daycare as well.
so you provide a path across the, park portion, you say.
Right.
Oh, I see.
We can interface with the park
Right,
in such a way that it's a good idea.
Yeah,
It is going to be kids.
as long as it's in keeping with the plan, the master park plan, I get it. Maybe we put that language, that's some language that you're working in unison under advisement of the master park plan process and Parks and Rec. Nobody's gonna bid on the project like this and say, oh, deal with it, they can't put it in that. It's so inconsequential, I'm not sure we want to necessarily put it in the.
We don't want people thinking they're going to put giant fences and block off the park entirely. I mean, you hope it won't, but, right?
But we wouldn't accept that.
Maybe we just place, and maybe I like the phrase, you know, I think there's someone said not just providing for vehicular access, but also note that we want to provide for pedestrian access, and then leave it to the people drafting the proposals to figure that out. Yeah, we'll get that.
Any other comments at this time? All right, so I'd encourage council members to, you know, look that over again if you haven't already, and you know, like I said, we'll have this back on our agenda next month, probably the workshop meeting, with recommended changes, and we'll talk about it again. No religious holidays involved. Anything else? All right, let's move on to 7B, which is 2-hour zone neighborhoods and enforcement periods. Samantha or Barbara, who's going to take this?
Barbara, if you want to go for it, I might have to talk a bit on the next agenda item. So
Yeah, no, sure. I'll certainly start with that. And if you are able to put the map up, that'll be helpful. Doesn't have to be right this minute, but so this is just kind of a first look at what the possible neighborhood and enforcement hours map would look like. It's been based on the on-street inventory of signs done by Public Works. Because what we, in looking into this further, after we'd received feedback from the public on the original recommendation, we learned that our current code is silent for many of the 2-hour regulated streets when it comes to sometimes the time and the days of enforcement, but quite often it may say times, but no days. It's very hit or miss as to whether there's actual information in the code as to how things are supposed to be administered. And when the Public Works crew was looking at the signs, many of the signs don't designate the days that the 2-hour parking is in effect. And so, if I were coming to a community that I wasn't familiar with and I saw a sign that said 2-hour parking 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and that's all it said, I would assume that that was 7 days a week. I know that we heard from residents when we proposed 7 days a week as the standard everywhere, that was too much protection. It'll be interesting to see because you'll see we're not proposing any 7 days a week at this point, but it'll be interesting to see if that changes people's parking habits. I don't know if there's going to be more parking happening. So this is what we're proposing at this point. And just so everybody knows, the boundaries on this map are really just reflecting where we have current 2-hour regulated streets. The line at Woodbine and then to Stewart kind of would run over. So you can't hear me, I guess. Okay. Whoops. Wow.
So we're back now, Barbara.
Okay. Do you know where I got where I got to?
A minute or two after, well, if you saw the sign and it said 8 to 6, you would think it was 7 days a week, but.
Yes, right. So we'll see where, what happens if we do switch to something where all the signs are going to be explicit. I mean, we want all the signs going forward to let people know exactly what the rules are. And so there may be people who didn't park for more than 2 hours on a Sunday who will now park for more than 2 hours on a Sunday. So some residents might notice some changes. I suppose that's possible. So I was just pointing out that on the map that Samantha had put up, and if you're able to bring that one up, Samantha, or if you have the one that has the boundaries that go all the way over to Wynwood Road, I just wanted everybody to know that when we do have the neighborhoods put together, the boundaries will go all the way over to Wynwood on the north side. It's just that for the moment, we don't have any regulated, 2-hour regulated streets on that kind of west side, I guess. And we're not saying that we would necessarily. It's just that if we ever would, if residents ever requested it, some of those would be in, some of those streets would be in the north neighborhood and some would be in the central. So we're proposing that the hours for the central neighborhood, which encompasses the downtown business district as well as the Montgomery Avenue business district. That's a little bit of a difference from what the Nelson Nygaard parking study map proposed. They didn't have the, there you can see they don't have the Montgomery Avenue business district included in there. We feel that they need the same protection that the downtown business district has. And so we're proposing 8 to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday for that. For the north and the south sections, we're proposing 8 to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Now, the reason that we're suggesting more protection for Central is because of the business activity in those areas and the fact that you have competition, if you will, for spaces between residents and people coming to patronize the businesses down there. So there's, we just feel that that's important to have that there. For some people in that neighborhood, they're going to see a little more protection because on some of those streets, it's just Monday through Friday. We're saying we think the restrictions should apply Monday through Saturday. And then some other ones where the streets have no designation of days, it may, it's like we've taken a day away. Although again, I don't know what other people assume when they see a sign that doesn't say what days the parking is effective. So it'd be hard to know for sure. The north and south, the north has some streets that are losing Saturday and or Sunday protection. There's some strange designations, surprising designations there. The enforcement hours are shifting for a few of the streets. We have some enforcement hours that started at 6 a.m., some that started at 10 a.m. We really have no way of knowing why those were ever set that way. So we feel, again, harmonizing so that we have something that is much easier for people to understand and remember is the way to go. The south side is almost all of the blocks there were already 8 to 6 Monday through Friday or 8 to 6 with no day designation. So there's very little change really there. So that's what we're proposing at this point. There's any kind of action on this is a ways off, and I can talk about that more in the committee updates. This is nowhere imminent at all. So I don't want anybody to think that. This is really just the first look at this. So I guess if anybody on council has questions, be happy to address those. And Samantha, if you have anything you wanted to say that I missed or clarify.
No, that was really great, Barbara. My apologies that the updated, another map that we have updated that did not hit in the packet here. But thank you for that explanation.
I just want to remind everyone that the proposal would not add new restrictions to streets that don't have it. It's only streets that currently have restrictions. It would be making sure that the times for the restrictions match up with all of the streets in this neighborhood. So if your street currently does not have parking restrictions, we would not be proposing adding them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Taking them away.
Yeah.
This is merely about what the times would be of enforcement.
Right. If your street already says 2-hour parking, it's still going to say 2-hour parking. If it doesn't say that, won't be affected at all.
There are two changes council previously agreed to that I also want to remind everyone of that are relevant to this discussion. One is that the businesses on Montgomery Avenue that are on like a corner and eligible to get parking permits currently will no longer be eligible once we implement the new system. So keep that in mind too when thinking about these protections. The other thing to point out is that the benefit of the neighborhoods, as we're calling them here, is instead of being limited, just parking on a single block, you'd be able to park anywhere in your neighborhood to help even out the differences in parking availability from block to block.
I just had a question, just so I understand. So if you have a permit in the north zone, you can only use that permit within that zone and not in the other zone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And Jean, right now, you could only use that permit on your block. So this gives someone who lives on a 2-hour regulated street more flexibility in where they park than they currently have right now.
Any other questions or comments from council? Very well. Appreciate all the work that the borough put together in, doing its sign census and figuring out what all the signs said and trying to rationalize all of these, conflicting signs. And there's a lot of work involved behind the scenes here. So we appreciate it. And, I think we'll talk more when we get to the committee reports about moving towards legislation. As Barbara said, we're still several months out here. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Samantha. All right, so 7C, the curbside EV charger.
I will, speak as little or as much as you'd like me to on that topic.
Okay. So I think we have a couple major points to consider here. The first is that we have one more charger that we will need to find a location for. I had articulated some principles for where the chargers should go. We should discuss if people support those. I can't really pronounce these things without council support here, so I want to make sure that council agrees with me about the locations. There are some communication issues that we should discuss about how to avoid the problems that we've encountered, that we've noticed with the notifying of households that are affected by this. And in general, other rules issues that may come up, like the flow signage and a couple others. So let's start with what I spoke about for what I proposed for locations, which are we should be looking at either something that fulfills one of these criterions. Either it's a commercial location, or it is someone who requests this to be put in front of their property, or filling out somebody with their own parking, somebody who has their own driveway or who has their own parking lot. There were three. Yeah, I said okay.
I thought one was that it was near place that had multi. Yeah.
Well, in general, we're going to be looking for places. We are going to be looking for places that are. All right. So when we're looking for locations, we're going to be looking for locations that are near multifamily housing or dense housing of various kinds, where people are unlikely to be able to put their own chargers in. So that's an area where, like an apartment complex or any other complex where people don't have complete control of a driveway or of a space where they can put in a charger. Looking at places which don't have serious parking problems identified by our parking study, so that we're not exacerbating a parking issue by putting these in.
A parking study will not find any serious parking problems anywhere in the borough. I just don't need to.
Well, I found some places that were at like close to 100% utilization. I think we can find places that are, relatively better suited. Let's put it that way. So those are things we're going to be keeping in mind as we look at that. In addition, my basic proposal was that if you have, there's a tradition in Philadelphia, if you have your single family house, you don't have a driveway, you have, you have your spots in front of you on the street. Now, that doesn't belong to you, right? It's in the public right of way. That belongs to the municipality, but convention is that is your spot. That you are entitled to use that spot for parking. So my proposal is that we honor that tradition for people who don't have other places to park. However, I don't think that applies to places that do have their own parking. So that's the distinction I would draw, is that if you have a driveway or a parking lot, that's no longer in play. I mean, right.
I actually really appreciate you saying that, because I think I'm the only council person without a driveway. And we refer to, someone's in my spot, and I always have to remind my family, it's not our spot. It is, but in fact, it's Harvard Borough's spot. We don't own that road. So I feel that, and we have it. And I get annoyed at my neighbor, like, why'd you park in my spot? I go Philly on, I agree with that. With that said,
we did not get an EV car because we don't have a charger. So when you would ask, like, does anybody have an EV charger? I thought I would love one. And yet people would say, oh, you're on council and look, you were corrupt and you got the EV charger, it's our taxpayer dollars. And then suppose I win the lottery and moved, perhaps the next person, you know what I mean? So I'm hesitant to say a household can request, because it has to be for the larger good. Apartment complexes, multi-family use dwellings, where folks really, to your point, are going to be limited on how they can purchase a car when there is not an option. Those are the places that make sense to me, downtown in the business, by the parks and by apartment complexes. And with that said, we need to do a better job at respecting the fact that, no, we don't have to ask permission for an EV charger or stormwater, but there are neighbors. We can put a flyer on the door. Hey, something's going on in the street. Can you give us a call? We can post it on social media.
Let's deal with that next.
Okay, so then I'm sorry, I'm going for commercial and 2 apartment or dense housing would be my 2 criteria for EV chargers.
I mean, there already were other criteria that were more logistical, like that, it has to be near and appropriate. It can't be blocking driveway. Right.
Yeah.
Two spaces near a college.
Yes.
That also limits gross.
Yeah.
And not all homes qualify, we know now.
Right.
You know, PICO has to approve it. So it's actually very limited number of spots.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
So, while we're discussing, if you want to have other conversations, you need to go outside the room first.
Yeah, thank you.
Now,
Yeah, but it's not.
We're done with public comment already.
It's not.
We've already had public comment. We're now done with public comment. Thank you.
That's okay. I'm trying to resolve it. Go ahead.
All right. So.
Yeah.
So like we've been saying, but this is a chicken and egg situation. You know, we don't have a charger. And I can't tell you how many residents I've heard about who said I would, something very similar, said I would switch to an EV if I could find a place to charge. And it needs to be convenient, because charging these cars can take many, many hours. You know, and the original intention for these stations is to serve residents. It's precisely for Narberth residents, most likely people on that block, so that they could park for 4 hours, 5 hours, and very easily move it. You know, the intention is that this would be for active cars that are actively charging. So if it's quite a distance, it's inconvenient to go run over in the middle of dinner when your car is done charging 5 blocks, move your car, you know. So there's a convenience factor that we were paying close attention to and trying to site these, you know, spaced around the borough. And so I do think when it's convenient, when it's nearby, we're going to see widespread adoption. And the EAC, the Climate Action Plan that we adopted as a council in 2020 has asked for close to 50% EV adoption, you know, on our timeline, 2030, 2035. And that's very doable if we have the charging infrastructure. We know that this year, electric cars are expected to reach price parity with gas cars because of the federal incentives, and that electric cars are cheaper to operate. So it's also an equity concern. We don't want residents of Narberth to be, you know, stuck buying a more expensive gas car when a more affordable electric car may be available, simply because the charging infrastructure isn't there.
So can I add one thing to this? All the new density and construction and apartments will have EV chargers. It's almost as if we almost need to kind of retrofit existing density and apartments to say, okay, we didn't require this at the time this was built, but now we're going to put them on the street, and these are public infrastructure to do so.
Right, and I just went on to that. Yeah, to your point, Cindy, you know, a new SALDA does require that new commercial construction has to provide for EV charging.
It's only new commercial, though, not new residential.
And, sorry, anything that requires land development, so new commercial as well as new multifamily.
Okay.
I just wanted to highlight what we both said, Fred and Michelle, in terms of the EV chargers being infrastructure. It really is, I think it's, and it resonated with me in terms of we're planning ahead for what's coming. And there's no denying that, like, that's the future of what vehicles will look like. And we're planning ahead for the borough to be prepared for that. So, I think that's a good way to look at it.
All right, so we have one charger in place. I did some looking at potential sites throughout the borough, and I wasn't really able to find something that seemed like a slam dunk to me. I know that Samantha already spent a bunch of time with Jeff Elvin trying to narrow down potential spots.
The Health and Safety Committee spent a considerable amount of time last year trying to figure out where the spots that would be. And you're right.
This was also Rob, let me assure you.
We've been, as you know, we've dealt a little bit of I guess, an oxymoron, if you will, in that, again, we're trying to provide these for people who don't have driveways or such, but of course, the flip side of that is you don't have a driveway, that means you're parking on the street. So finding somewhere that has low enough utilization of on-street parking, but also doesn't have driveways is a challenging proposition to identify. You all remember one of the sites we had looked at before that council, in hindsight, rightfully said we weren't going to do an EV charger, was near the Iona and Woodbine intersection.
Because of the parking.
Because of the parking utilization.
And one outside one from Port apartments.
Where is that?
That's 300?
Harbor?
300.
No, it's Narberth. So, I mean, that's probably the largest apartment complex.
Well, that's why, I think that's part why we ended up doing the one at 145, North Narberth.
Okay, which is interesting because I see that as two such radically different areas. You know, when I walk by the Montgomery Court Apartments, there is an under garage parking facility, but it's often utilized North Narberth by residents there. And I think those are folks that, again, when I say we need to kind of retrofit, that would be an obvious, but I'm assuming maybe there's not a pole.
I can look at it. We'll take a look. I mean,
Sorry, one other thing about the pole. It's not just that it has a pole, it's that it has a pole where the location of the sidewalk and the location of the pole isn't gonna have like charger wires, messing with the sidewalk. Though actually, no, I backtrack on that. That was the original thought when Pico was gonna let us mount them directly on the pole.
Yeah, that was.
And now, yeah, that's right, never mind. So forget that part.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at the 300 block. So it does have some occasional heavy parking like on the weekends, it looks like.
But no, I would say that daily because there are folks that don't pay for the residents who don't pay for the underground parking.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, you talk about incentive to buy an EV.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're gonna roll the dice and you get the open EV spot.
So we can consider that. My suggestion was going to be that we ask for volunteers at this point. I realize that there is the potential for corruption, accusations of corruption, but given that the community seems to think that that is the best approach, we could ask for volunteers, or we could find a place for it at 201 Sabine.
Why would we do that at 201 Sabine only mark we to develop?
Well, if we're talking about putting it at the street corner rather than the parking lot, presumably the streetscape is not going to be developed. I mean, that is a potential problem. That's why I'm not saying let's do it. I'm saying it's a possibility.
What about, Narberth Park? I don't know that.
Well, we already have several in the parking lot, behind the library for the park. I mean, if you're talking about on, Windsor itself, I think the parking lot is probably a better spot for it than Windsor. Given that we have a borough parking lot there, there's not a compelling reason to put it anywhere else other than the parking lot.
So just one thing to clarify is we have had volunteers, since this stuff, but then the poll was disqualified by the electrician and Pico, so even if there's a poll and otherwise looks like it would work, we still don't know for sure until the electrician looks at it.
All right, I'm not hearing a lot of consensus about how to proceed with this. So
Maybe it sounds like one of the ideas we could look into is potential for 300, that's 60.
Let's look into that and see if that's a possibility, and we can talk about this again next month.
I'm hesitant to do the volunteers for all the reasons stated, that we're kind of customizing, we're providing, well, I guess it's really only one, but hopefully there's more to follow. EV chargers that were.
I mean, I feel like it will probably be a long time before we need to put more EV chargers on. Because, you know, you gotta remember, cars only charge these things for a few hours, right? I mean, you can serve a lot of cars with EV chargers for that. I think it could be a while. Okay. So I feel like we really want to put this charger in a place where it is likely to serve the most residents in the most convenient way. And I mean, I hear, like, I'm happy to hear that residents have a compelling reason to say this is a bad location because. Did you know about this? Did you know that there's a, you know, that, and so I think it's fine, but, you know, it's the public. We gotta put them somewhere. Yeah, I think it is to serve the public. So I just think we should try to balance the factors on. I feel it's not about, I mean, I feel like there should be another one on the south side, honestly.
Yeah. So let's look into this location, and then if we hear any more volunteers, we will look into their possibilities.
I'm sorry, you're gonna look into the 300 block?
We'll look into 300 block of North Essex.
No, North Narber.
North Harvard, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that's what I said, it's not.
300 block.
Thank you, Cindy.
We'll consider that. And we'll discuss again later once we have some more specific proposals.
Yeah, Mr. Craig, can I just say one other thing? And I thank you for what you said at the beginning. But, you know, while this whole kerfuffle was playing out over the last couple of weeks, as you mentioned, the UN report came out, and the New York Times also reported on teenagers that are now bringing suits against state governments, that they're not doing enough, the governments are not doing enough to protect a clean and safe environment for their generation and for their children's generation. And this is playing out in about a dozen states, including Pennsylvania, the states that have, as part of their state's constitution, a provision that guarantees the welfare, the health of the environment for future generations. So as council members, we're in a tight spot, right? We hear the particular complaints of individual homeowners, but we need to take the long view. We also hear from teenagers in our own communities who are concerned about even wondering if they should even have children in the future because of climate change. So we're in this position where we have to balance all these things, and I just wanted to say that publicly. That's why we're grappling with this. It's a pilot program with PICO. It's, as you say, it's the first in the area, and there are some bumps, there's some growing pains, but I'm proud that we can do this, even if we can't, you know, get everything perfect on the first go.
Are we kind of going around with the comment, or I'm not very much? This isn't really about placement, but I really need to say public there. I really hope we can take the flow signs off the top.
Yeah, let's just discuss that real quick.
Saying, and it's like a Uber, you know, pickup
Right.
location. I mean, it made complete sense in a city, right?
Right.
Because the people are trying to find the charger that they found in the map, like they don't need that.
Yeah.
So can you please take them off there?
Yeah. No, and I agree.
Is there any council objection to removing?
No, that's right. And that was not in the original.
Right.
Yeah, so it was nice.
Originally, these were going to be attached to the pole.
Oh,
That's what the
Let's take those off, thank you.
Yeah, we'll
the whole unit.
Can they do, I mean, okay.
I think we've looked into it, and they should be removable.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Was the tower?
oh, they can,
Not the
I'm sure
tower.
they're removable.
Well,
I can do that problem.
Michelle has tools.
No, the flow sign, I'm not sure we're talking about the whole.
Okay, I was talking about, we can't cut that down.
Like, well, they're not,
Well, here's the,
Well,
yeah, here's the thing about the height. Well, no, see, those work differently. So the thing about that model,
Wait, which one?
the model in your left hand,
Okay,
the new ones,
yeah,
is that they're designed so that no matter where the charging port is on the car, you can get the charger to it. Whereas the older model, you have to, if you're, especially on a one-way street, if the port on your, if the charging port on your car doesn't really match up with where the charger is, you're kind of out of luck.
Okay. So we can remove the floor sign, but we can't really, we need the length to reach the other side of the car.
Functionally, it's a better model, it's not, right? But then I always look at the electric pole next to it, which often has like another electric.
Yeah.
Hanging
All right, why don't we see whether it's good?
Like a nervous.
Yeah, why don't we see if we can put the Narberth, if we can put like a Narberth sign over there somehow, or if it's.
Yeah, so
Let's let Jeff have a look at it and see whether we can get a Narberth logo on it instead. Hopefully not like a glowing blue one, like a normal Narberth logo.
Yeah.
Or,
I think our primary goals are to need to just get rid of that.
yeah, to get rid of that, I agree. All right. That was easy. Did you have more you wanted to?
No, not really, and I just think you guys are pretty much said it all. I think that change is always hard to see something new. It sort of shocks you at first, and when I put in the LED streetlights, and people are like, oh, it's awful, and I think the accommodation for us, you get used to things in the environment, sometimes you don't see how much stuff is in the built environment already, like transformers, and you look up, you're like, wow, we are in the middle of this unsuspected electrical grid. I don't notice it, I block it out, I'm used to it. I think that EV chargers are going to be something that's going to become commonplace in the future. I think, I truly believe that. I will tell you honestly, if I owned a condominium and somebody put an EV charger in proximity, I would feel the value of my home. It probably went up because somebody would say, oh, this is great. You know, because I can't get an EV car any other way. I mean, once you realize how much money you save with an EV car, because the maintenance is basically zero and the gas is zero, you very quickly start saving money. I'd like more people to have that option, if only for that. So that's what I have to say.
All right, other comments about the. All right, so I'd like to move on to the communications issue. So obviously, you know, a big problem is that the residents felt like they weren't respected, and we didn't contact them ahead of time and let them know what was going on. So going forward, you know, how do we fix this?
Well, the point I do want to emphasize is the borough does already have a process in place, and you know, the thing I'll certainly, as borough manager, will certainly take responsibility for. And while I'm certainly unapologetic about installing EV chargers, I am very apologetic, as you rightfully pointed out in the TV interview, that the process we have was not followed. Because the process we have for any, you know, capital infrastructure project we do that affects the residents, whether it's the paving of Dudley Ave we did 2 or 3 years ago, the stormwater bump outs last year, other past related borough projects. You know, we send a direct notice to the property owner, and clearly that did not happen in this case. And that was, you know, that was a failure of mine. That wasn't a failure of the process itself. And I do hope the people who are here can hear me say this, whether it's in recording or however, that I am definitely, you know, owe them an apology in that regard. Now, I do want to emphasize, though, just one point I just want to make clear is that, you know, notification is not when we're asking for consent. Right. But I do think people, yes, do have a right to know, even if it is the borough's property, even if it's the borough's right of way, and the borough doesn't have, even if the borough doesn't have a legal responsibility to do that, it is good governance to do it. So, I think the process that we have, you know, just, you know, was, again, that was on me, that process wasn't followed. So I guess that's the way I would frame the question to council is, you know, are we fine with the process as it is? And if so, then I think we stick with what we're doing, and, you know, and I take responsibility for that not being done. And then, you know, again, we make sure the process we have is being done in the future. But if there are other ideas that can strengthen that existing process, you know, I think that's a good dialogue as well.
Can I say,
the future home of an arbor shade tree signs, I think the process of direct mailing and notification is great. And I really appreciate you saying that's not a consent, an invitation for support, but rather an notification. We have become so accustomed in the borough of those future home of an arbor shade tree. Could we celebrate the EV chargers, the stormwater bump outs with a future home of stormwater sign, cone, something that we can then positively display, you know, this kind of green infrastructure.
My suggestion, yeah, would be that there are some projects that's appropriate for it. There are other things that we do that have big impacts that might not make sense for it. So what I was going to suggest, what I'd already suggested, we just mentioned it. I think it's something for council to think about. Should we take more responsibility when, I mean, as folks who live in the community, right, and talk to our neighbors every day, when we can foresee that a project we're talking about in the process of development, thinking that it's liable to have the impacts that people will really want to know about it. Whether it's the stormwater bump outs or EVs or LED lights or a major change in zoning or a large development project, maybe, you know, something that involves private property, those kinds of, you know, the master parks, those kinds of things that have big impacts. We do a lot of small stuff that nobody knows anything about. Right? Budgeting, the big things, a change in the form of the way we're taxing or something like that. Those should make it part of our process as a council. That somebody says, you know what, is this something where we can have a conversation about a communication plan? You know, what would be an appropriately scaled and appropriate communication plan for this? And just have a conversation in public. And when we have our borough manager, they're also to say, well, okay, don't get ahead of yourselves, that's not feasible for these reasons, or that will cost X amount of money, but we have an informed discussion, we'll put something together. And then as a council, we kind of own that, then we're like responsible if it doesn't work. But I don't know. I just think maybe that should be not for every last decision we make, but for some of the larger projects, maybe it would be a website like that. Like if it's sort of a long-term project, like we would say right now, like this is going to be going on for a long time, and a lot of updates, a lot of information that can be presented visually. It seemed to lend itself to that, right? They're not going to put a future home, you know, right there. So we future ours on the front. I mean, maybe we should have that conversation as part of our process.
Yeah, I think a page that's like an FAQ on what this project is, why are we doing this, what's the project, what's it going to look like, you know, how much does it cost, what kind of grants are we getting, all that stuff. Just a one-page summary of the project would be good to have on the webpage so we could direct people to. You know, they'll receive their letter, and then you can also direct them to the webpage. For any interested parties, we can then direct to that. I think projects on the scale of the stormwater bump outs or the anything that's not like a one-time short-term project.
To add to what you both were saying, I think anytime there's something new that the community has not experienced before, whether it's a pilot project or, because this is something that's new for everybody. At this point, they don't know anything about it, they don't know the background, so it really would have benefited from a higher level of communication. So, we did it for the Wheels on Windsor pilot because that was also new. So I think that's really, and I totally agree with Michelle about having some sort of conversation about communications by a project that has that threshold. And I guess that's a judgment call that we're going to have to make as council.
I think if I can just vouch for what everyone's here saying. I think Borough's had a lot of successful examples of that model. I was mentioned, Wheels on Windsor. You look at more recently with the work we're doing with Station and Square. The work that we just started page recently for 230 Haverford, following that public presentation. And then you look at examples where we maybe did it slightly later than we should, like the earned income tax, and then that ultimately was a benefit. So I think there's a lot of merit to what you're talking about with that.
I was just going to say maybe F&A could come up with a method of qualifiers form of project type. Does it meet this criteria? Have you got,
You know, I do love that. I did a little chat, but okay. Okay.
Make it really simple.
We can take a stab at that if it's helpful.
All right. And, okay, just to wrap this up real quick, I would like to talk to the condo, so I'm going to offer to talk to the condo association. Let's help the members object here, because, I think I did not like everybody walking out, in a very angry fashion here. I think that does not bode well. I would like to speak to them and see if I can make sure that they feel their concerns are being heard. Does anybody have objections to that?
No, thank you, Brophy.
Yeah, thank you.
People more of us to do that, and I hope that some of the other 36 people who live in the building will attend as well. Coming from there.
All right, so maybe,
Want to buy these.
yeah, if anybody else wants to volunteer, you can let me know, but I'm gonna offer to speak to them. And more to listen, to their, one of their concerns. Give them any time until they feel they're denied here. All right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about when the EV chargers? I'll point out that the CBS News reporter who spoke to me earlier asked about watching this meeting, and it does sound like they spoke to the news media, so it's possible there will be more stories about this coming in. Mm-hmm.
Which I'm proud of, I'm actually really proud of that, and I hope when Pico talks about it in the media, they start to name our referral, because you point out the responsibility we have as governments and stewards of our community and earth, and this is the right decision. And there are, what's the word you said? Kerfuffles? Kerfuffles. There are kerfuffles, and we are apologetic for what I'm telling, but overall, I'm proud that we are taking to our commitment.
Yeah, we're leading, you know, but we're growing things.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from council? All right, let's move on to our action items. 8A, 3 Elmwood condemnation. Someone like to make a motion? Yeah, we have a couple of actual actions here.
And move to
Time sensitive.
consider resolution 2023-03 for the condemnation in lieu of sale for 3 Elmwood. Second?
Okay. Samantha.
Sure. So essentially this document is in discussion with the seller. It was discussed that the borough would do a friendly condemnation in lieu of sale. The reason for that is transfer taxes are applied when it's a condemnation versus a sale. So that is what we're doing tonight. We are scheduled for closing on 3 Elmwood on April 11th. And yeah, so that's where we're at here.
Which is next Tuesday. Do we have any like public events or any public notification?
It's taken a lot of work to get us to closing, so we haven't gotten past. Once we get past that step, I think that is a very good idea.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion of this condemnation? All right, let's vote. You're going to vote on resolution 2023-03 for condemnation in lieu of sale for 3 Elmwood. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous, 6-0. Item 8B, fee schedule amendment.
Council President.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, so it actually was brought to my attention by the borough solicitor that there was a miscommunication he and I had that we actually need a resolution in order to do this. So if you want, maybe I could just introduce the idea while I'm still here and speak to what this is. And then if council is amenable to it, then we can direct the solicitor to draft a resolution that council could then consider at a later date.
Okay. So we don't need to take a motion at this point, then, sounds like. Go ahead and discuss the issue.
And sorry, earlier in the meeting, I didn't suggest moving this from action items to discussion items.
Sorry.
So we talked a lot for the public and folks who are new on council. At the end of 2021, the borough made substantial changes to its fee schedule. And the purpose of that was the borough, the purpose of a fee is for the borough to recoup the cost of providing the service. The borough was losing lots of money on our building permit and code projects. So we looked at these in other places, notably Lower Marion. It's kind of a standard check. And we compared all that to what we're paying to provide the inspections and to provide the services that people are getting from those permits. You all may remember something council asked us to do that was very illustrative was to take like an average property and look at how the old fee versus the new fee would compare. In particular, we found that the borough's proposal for changing the building permit fees was going to be particularly onerous, and so we made the right decision at that time to kind of give further examination to that particular item. So that was left unchanged in the fee schedule. However, the problem with 3% project costs is while for small projects, it's kind of in line where the fees should be. For very large projects, it gets well beyond what the actual costs of the borough are of providing the services and inspections and such for the project. So you look at projects like the Elm, 114 Forest, you look at the two projects under construction now on Haverford Avenue, we're talking projects of that scope, where legally the borough cannot charge a fee that high for it. So what borough staff did in the past, prior, and all these projects, started prior to my time here, is they gave the developer the option of, instead of paying the 3% fee, to reimburse the borough for actual cost incurred by putting down an escrow of $50,000 and then replenishing that escrow once it fell, I believe, below $10,000. However, that process was not formalized, and we have a development project now, in particular 650 Montgomery Avenue, where I totally understand the developers asked for a little bit more of a formal sort of process and documentation to that. So the borough solicitor suggested to me that borough council on the actual fee schedule should actually put language in the fee schedule about this escrow option if council wants to go in that direction. And again, I'll point out as well, technically speaking, as staff, borough council sets the fee schedule, and generally we have to abide by it. We wouldn't, for one person charge $100 for an electric permit, and for the next person say, oh, it's only going to be $75. The reason an electric permit is $100 is because the borough ends up paying your fees about $100 when all is said and done. I'm using a hypothetical number here. Whereas hypothetically for so many big projects, you're looking at, permit fees that would be six figures, and you look at the borough budget, we only pay your fees about, low six figures for an entire year worth of work. So again, the purpose of this is not to give a break to any developer, but to make sure we're meeting our legal requirement that our fees are not excessive, because someone could, no one has threatened to do this, but someone could sue us, if our fees were particularly onerous, and it's happened in plenty of municipalities before. One that comes to mind to me is there's actually a government that sued another government up towards New Hope. I believe it's the Solberry School District, whichever school district is up that way, actually sued the municipality. I think it was Solberry Township or New Hope Borough for excessive permit fees, because they would charge like $400,000 or $500,000 for a new construction project, when the actual cost to the town of inspecting it was maybe $50,000, $60,000. So that's not the position we started to call out in a particular case. I was in the news and the media and all that, and I just want to give an illustrated example, not to pick on anyone, about why we don't want to be in that position.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions or comments from council, so I think let's instruct, anyone have any objection to our solicitor drafting this change? Okay, so you can go ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
And let's move ahead with the committee reports. Infrastructure, it's not here.
or he did submit it, so I will try to sort of go through the highlights.
All right,
Sorry,
okay.
here. Okay, so, the first thing we discussed was that at 2 Elmwood, there was one of the retaining walls, I'm talking about those retaining walls for the channel that goes out to Shortridge was collapsed, or is collapsing, and we were thinking about, reaching out to the owner and potentially trying to combine that one with the other project and coordinate that because it does need to be done. We learned that the master park plan grant that we received is going to require us to structure our master park plan committee a little bit differently than council had discussed. They have some specific recommendations about composition, which we don't need to follow to a T, but they do need 4 to 7 members, and it needs to be separate from the Parks and Rec committee itself. So basically, Parks and Rec and Infrastructure are going to propose a list of members for council to approve that is in, and stop me if I'm getting this wrong, please just jump in, because sure, I'm just on the fly here. So that I'll coordinate with the requirements of the grant. We discussed our IT contract renewal, and our manager recommended staying with our main contractor for 3 years. I think our services improved, and there's cost and upkeep and staff time involved in changing those services, so we thought that was a good recommendation. And then the borough manager gave us a report on current level projects, including the bridge, and I think that I'm trying to think what we need to talk about here. Let me just mention, I'm not going to go through all of them, but let me mention the 80 Windsor roof, because I think that's kind of significant. I mean, I think we touched on this before. The roof at 80 Windsor has long been known or suspected to have some problems structurally, and we now have confirmed that it does have structural problems, such that the roof is too heavy to be supported by the rafters. It's a slate roof, and if we had a snow, the whole thing would quite likely collapse on anybody inside, or possibly just collapse and roll damage if we're lucky. So we are going to need to replace that roof. I get an initial bid from a contractor that was extremely expensive. And then we had a second bid from someone who proposed a different way to do the repair that still works, but costs a lot less money. And so I think that's going to be an expense we're going to need to absorb for safety reasons. And I believe we discussed that it may come out of the local share grant before some of the 100 Conway improvements, because it's a safety issue. We need to get that done. I'm hoping that. So we talked about, I think everybody knows we were awarded the DC multi-level funding for the Town Square project planning. We were not awarded the federal RCP grant funding. And working my way up, in the North Avenue Bridge, we had, I think we've had this question of the routing of the electrical wire to Pico, where they suggested they wanted to make changes, which would be problematic from our point of view, because we don't want to go back to the drawing board. I think that issue was brought into resolution, so I'm hoping that he might have good news for us. And I also believe that he's going to present at our next workshop.
So I'm participating in a meeting in Pico on Monday to get a final resolution on that matter.
Okay, well, okay, and I think those are the highlights.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that May meeting will be good news. We'll see what happens. Go on there. Fingers crossed. Thank you, Michelle. FNA?
3 things. We had to cancel FNA meeting last term. Barbara was away. I got called to a medical doctor. So that's just a virus. Then Moffitt was going to come and talk about some ideas about some potentials for new progressive taxes. So we postponed that, but it was probably best for me to have a new borough manager and let that person settle anyway. I do have some updates though. John Walker tells me by our next meeting, he will have the draft of the resolution set up for the Friends of Narberth Green initiatives, which is great timing for 3 Elmwood, because then we'll actually have a nonprofit structure to begin to solicit donations. We do have some community members who have already come forward to say we would like to contribute to this. We just haven't had that shell yet. So I should have that for you for the next business meeting, hopefully. Additionally, I'll be attending the next planning commission meeting. We've asked the planning commission to take a look at this idea of an intensity of use or dispersion ordinance.
for both 5A and then Montgomery Ave Business District, which would, on Montgomery Ave, for example, anything that is regulated in 5A would put some sort of distribution or again, regulate intensive use. And Samantha speaks to this loveliest examples of cautionary tales and others. That would prevent, let's say, 5 smoke shops opening up row by row on Montgomery Avenue. So you would say, okay, because smoke shops are regulated in 5A, there is a distance between them that is required on Montgomery Avenue. We really identified in FA a small limit of what those shifts would be. So I used to always say, when people would say, why are there so many dry cleaners in Narberth, my answer was always because there are that many shirts. What this really intentionally looks at, with all the new change and turnover in Narberth, do we want to be more intentional on regulating use and intensity? So, yeah, so anyway, we're taking to planning commission. The planning commission reached out to the county. I thank Solicitor Walco, who brought up that we were one of the few municipalities that does not have zoning like this. So this is something that I think we should really be thinking thoughtfully about, and I should have that for you after my planning commission meeting. Next, I have nothing that I think requires our attention other than a nod from you all. I met with Emily, Sue, and Francesca about the Narberth Farmers Market set to come on Thursday. They could be meeting with Samantha, and I volunteered to kind of take this over as a liaison with the NBA. And I'm hoping I can just kind of run through what they're thinking. There are kind of 3 questions. For Walco, for Solicitor Walco, for Public Works Borough Manager. For Public Works. So essentially our 3 neighbors have come together and solicited local farmers markets to do a pop-up on what they're proposing is a Thursday, a Thursday kind of 3 to 7, where they would create this collective. They're calling it really a civic pop-up, where local bakers and farmers markets could come with a permit. They are requiring actually that farmers markets tables set up actually take snack benefits, for example. Any leftover produce or baked goods, they're hoping to buy wholesale to coordinate with the food bank. So really thoughtfully. What they're asking of us then is questions, do we need huckster licenses? Questions like that, if it's a pop-up farmer's market.
I don't want to say the wrong thing on the spot. So.
You know what, I'm actually not asking for this. Yeah. I'm saying these are the things that we have to explore. Are you comfortable if I explore them?
Well, I do want to emphasize we can't introduce new agenda items.
Okay, this is just, I'm going to just discuss it and you can all give me the nod whether you're comfortable with me asking these questions. But things such as, how does business privilege tax work? Could Public Works do tent and tables? What street could be closed down?
So we can't really have a substantive discussion on that.
I'm not asking for feedback. I'm asking for a nod. Are you okay if I ask these questions to the office?
You continue pursuing this idea. Are we okay with you continuing to pursue this idea? I think, I don't see any objections. So continue to look into it and bring in something more detailed.
And hopefully in a month. I mean, does council have to vote on this is my question.
I think you probably should. I mean, you don't have to, but you probably, you don't, the statement I said earlier, that you're not legally required to, but it would probably be good governance for you to do so.
If it's going to be more than like a one-off thing, we should approve it.
Okay, then I will ask those questions and hopefully have something finalized for you so we can get that in the next couple of weeks for the spring market. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, thank you for helping donate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah, it's an exciting idea. I mean, we always like the zebra, green zebra.
Yeah.
Green zebra.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to have something new along those lines.
And just, I love and appreciate that our citizens are thinking, how is it green? How is it citizen, like buy local, invest local? How do you give folks, make sure that you're helping support folks that may not have access to that? And that's what these folks are doing. So I'll keep you posted after I answer these questions at the office.
Public health and safety.
Yeah, so we met in March and the public comments related to traffic concerns. And the traffic engineer was absent for personal reasons. Okay. But so we did discuss the traffic concerns that we've been discussing for a while, especially Iona. And we are, let's see, since that meeting, I believe that the traffic engineer was able to meet with some of the residents on Iona to discuss, just kind of walk through the problem area and think about solutions. So I'm very grateful that the engineer was willing to make a field site visit. So I think that's been good. So we'll get that's going to inform his recommendations that hopefully he'll get back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, and then the plastics ordinance was reviewed. The EAC made recommendations on plastics 2.0 to include updates that are more in line with what neighboring communities have done since we took the lead years ago. And so our manager is going to bring, work with the solicitor to bring a draft ordinance to the council. We meet next Friday at 9 a.m. That's our next meeting. And one thing we have to do is we have to do some coordination with the fire department around some of the traffic concern questions and possible solutions, because the fire company had concerns about full stops interfering with, an emergency. So we're going to try to work that out.
Yeah, I did make sure the fire department knew when the next VHS meeting would be, and make sure they have someone attend.
Okay, great.
All right, and we did have a public health and safety concern that was brought up, which was the AEDs, which were brought up in the public comment. I think Barbara, you had something to add on the AED issue.
Sure. I mean, there are AEDs in Narberth Park. These were put in when I was on council the first time, so I don't remember all the locations, but there's one at the top of the stairs in Borough Hall. I don't know if there's one at Sabine Park. I'm not sure about that. There's definitely one near the basketball courts, so we do have some public ones available.
All right, thanks, and good to know. So I did not actually know that. So. And while you're on, Barbara.
Yes. Okay.
Update from parking.
Yes. So, I presented the first look at what might be the neighborhoods and enforcement periods for the streets that currently have 2-hour regulated parking. That's not the only task that the parking committee was given. Part of what we're doing too is just getting a lot of other nuts and bolts details about parking in metered parking, other kinds of parking, not just the 2-hour regulated, getting our code to actually reflect what we do. And so that's part of the ordinance that's being drafted. I'm going to return now to working with the solicitor on finalizing that draft so that we'll have an ordinance that council can consider. But at this point, it's premature to set an effective date for that because, this ordinance is going to include also these new rules for 2-hour regulated parking. And there's going to be much more implementation period, a greater implementation period needed for that than for any of the other things that are cleaned up in the ordinance. And we'd like to give Alan a chance to understand what the changes are that we're proposing and get his feedback on those, just to so that he can get his thoughts and see. But we'd also like to give him and the new borough manager time then to give us advice on the best time frame in which to set up the implementation, because the changes to the 2-hour regulated permit program is going to require more staff time in that first year when we go to something new than it will in subsequent years. And so we really need their input before we say, oh, okay, here's when we want it to be effective. So I anticipate that it will be a little while before the ordinance is coming before council, but hopefully we can have something that is effective, 6-9 months out. So we don't have any meetings of the committee scheduled at this point. I don't anticipate that we're going to need any, but the committee exists in case we do need to meet. So,
Okay, ask a question, Barbara. So what I'm hearing is an ordinance is coming.
Yes. Yes.
Does the ordinance contain provisions that specify how the process by which residents on block can request a 2-hour parking zone to be put in place, and the process by which a 2-hour parking zone can be removed, particularly on those blocks such as South Essex where there are no residents?
The short answer is, off the top of my head, I can't remember now if our solicitor said that needs to be in the ordinance or whether it can just be adopted by resolution, but we're going to do whatever he said. We've already proposed, the committee proposed the process for that, and it was presented to council last fall. So you may not remember it. That's why I don't remember if it's ordinance or resolution, because it's been a while since I looked at it. But council felt, we didn't get any feedback from council saying they wanted us to change what we proposed for the rules.
Remember a process for residents to petition to add it to our zone? I don't remember that the committee ever grappled with or provided a resolution for how a parking zone can be removed. There are no residents.
Right. Oh, where there are no residents. Oh, that one. No, that's still on our list. There are a few little things, but those I don't know yet. As we get further into drafting the ordinance, we will determine whether there are things that the committee needs to weigh on again, or are these things that maybe working, a team of the solicitor, the borough manager, the assistant borough manager, and me, can we come up with something that we can bring to council to get your thoughts on? I just don't know yet. There's several little details like that are still out there. They're on my list. Sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking.
Thanks.
Let's say, I mentioned this is going to require a lot of staff time. I see a lot of the staff here who are going to be involved in that process, and I appreciate your presence in the meeting, and we'll try to make it as painless as possible. Thank you, Barbara. So we do have one EV charger issue that did not get addressed earlier. We can go back to that, I assume, or
It's on the agenda. So
yeah, right. So the issue that I wanted to mention is that the EV charger on North Essex is in a 2-hour parking zone. So I don't know that we have really kind of grappled with that, whether we want to enforce the regular rules of a 2-hour zone on those spots, or whether we're going to apply the rules that are already in our code, which say that if as long as you're charging, you are allowed to stay in that spot. So our options are we can try to figure this out now, or we can let public health and safety make a recommendation on Friday.
Well, I have an initial thought for it. So I think one of our stated goals for the EV charger is that it's intended for people in that area to use and not for people out of that area to use. And given that we talked about moving the 2-hour parking zone program to being neighborhood-based versus being block-based, I would recommend that once we have the new parking ordinance done, that it should apply to even if you're at the EV charger, given the goals we've stated for the program.
Yeah, someone in the larger neighborhood can use the parking space. I mean, I think that would also acknowledge so the idea is that it would be for residents. So if you have a resident
charge for 2 hours?
What's that?
You can only charge for 2 hours?
If you have a resident permit, you can park there. It's resident parking like everything else. If you don't have a permit, you're parking there for 2 hours.
You're charging for 2 hours.
If you do have a permit, it's a normal parking space for your electric vehicles.
How long does it take to charge?
It can be charged up to 7 hours. It depends.
2 hours is not really enough for a full charge.
Yeah, but you can 2 hours is enough to get around down.
So if they had a house fence, they wouldn't be able to charge.
Well, you could. You would just have to call in and get the 2 hours. You would have to get a pass.
We go on the website.
It'd be like any other house guest parking.
Oh, God.
I mean, that's fine. I think that fits into the general.
Yeah.
If we're going to put it in a 2-hour parking zone, I think those parking zones are regulated for a reason. I like that idea.
And Fred, I'll add that I would think, and we'll look at this because this will have to be in the ordinance, you know. We'll look at this, but I think we would want the same restrictions to apply as we're suggesting, I believe we've suggested apply to the chargers that are in the metered spaces, that you don't get to park there unless you're charging your car. You know, so there's a certain length of time, you know, and then there's a certain grace period in which you have to move it after you've finished charging. And so I would think we'd want to do that same kind of thing for this space, because I don't think we want a resident of the block with a permit who has an EV to park there all day long when they're only charging for, 6 hours. I think we want them to move so that someone else, another resident, can charge their car. Is that?
We're not making a decision tonight on this.
All right, let's,
Well, I think it's compatible. I mean, if you have a sticker, say, you can be there longer than 2 hours. You have to be actively charging. So once you're not actively charging, you gotta move. So it's compatible.
sure. So let's why don't you, why don't we refine that either?
Yeah.
Bring that out.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll formalize that later. But for now, it sounds like we have a consensus on how to proceed. Okay. Announcements for the good of council. All right, well, I do have an announcement, which is, Samantha, you want to recognize your final day here. This is,
Oh, wow.
You said you wanted to take, you wish you could take ours with you, so this is all the borough, in a map form here. Yeah, but it's bubble wrap, so you can open it, it's bubble wrap, so if you want to leave a bubble wrap for your trip, that's fine.
Definitely to see that.
Yeah.
No, oh my goodness, thank you all so much. Oh my goodness. Oh, look at this.
You can see it go wrap.
Oh, yeah.
If you wanted to-
Yeah, well, I can see, I don't know how well it'll show on camera, but, I can see it. I can see it through the bubble wrap. This is very cute.
Is that the right parking zone?
No, this is really nice. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for your service. All right. Before we adjourn, we are going to have an executive session afterwards to discuss a property matter regarding the disposition of borough-owned property at 230 Haverford, a legal matter regarding ongoing litigation with 198 Elmwood, and a personnel matter related to the hiring of the borough manager. And I don't know how many new topics have come up, and I do not believe that we will be adjourning the session afterwards.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All right, we're going to adjourn. All those in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.